Hi, hello, how are you? It is me, Teacher Allie. Give me a hi or hello. Let me know that you can hear me. And let me know if you found me via Facebook. I recently did a little commercial for this very day, this very event on Facebook, and I saw that a lot of you said you were coming from there. So I'm just wondering. I haven't only done something like that once before. It was fun. If you saw it, it was fun. It's interesting. Hi. I'm so excited to see everybody for the free week of prep from Kaplan. Did y'all know this is the free week? You knew that, right? Like, this is the free week of GRE prep from Kaplan. It's not just today. It's not just quant comparison. It is a whole week of free prep from Kaplan. Hello, I'm so excited. We're going to start with this here agenda on the screen, and then we're going to get started with your quant comparison lesson and all of the things from today's event, because it is a whole event. It's not just one thing, it's lots of things. We're going to start with a little overview of the GRE, just really little. We're going to talk about scoring. And then we're going to take a class on quant comparison. I know that y'all love quant comparison. Actually, I do find, if I'm going to be honest, that usually students are a little hesitant about this because this is not what we would typically see in like a math class, but this isn't a math test. This is the GRE. And also, I love quant comparison because I'm not actually a huge fan of math. Like, hello, my name is Allie, and I am a math hater, to be honest. But the really cool thing about quant comparison is that it is about comparing and contrasting. So it's really very little math if you look at it the right way and if you learn to see the shortcuts. And so that's what I do as much as possible. And so I ended up loving quant comparison because it's kind of the least mathy math on the GRE. And I hope that you learn to see it that way as well. And then after your lesson, we're going to do prep coaching with me. So I am one of Kaplan's GRE coaches. On our website, you will see that our plus courses all come with coaches. And coaches are those people who work with you privately to make sure that you are getting as many points as you should be for the amount of time and work and effort that you're putting into your prep, and make sure that your tests are coming out the way that they should, and that you should change focus when you need to so that you don't study one thing too long and start forgetting something else. We answer all of your questions and we tutor you as needed as well. So I can't do all of that here because there are a bunch of us, but I will answer as many of your questions as I can. And you should have seen my poll. You saw my poll down below. If you entered your email there, you will receive a PDF of today's lesson after class, as well as my contact information, and you'll be able to ask me questions and get my advice and feedback all week long. So if you ever were hoping to have a teacher that you can get advice and feedback from, you don't have one already, now you do. You have me for the whole week. So I will be your teacher and your coach as long as your email is in my box. Without your email, I can't reach out to you, and then I can't help you. But if you put it in there, then you definitely will get the PDF of today's lesson, some handouts from me about the topics that we discussed today, as well as access to me for the week to advise you as much as I can. So I hope that you find that to be really helpful. And then I'm just going to answer questions, whatever questions that you may have, as many as I can get to. Now, there are some specific things that I want to talk about today. One of them is the chat that you see, and I see that you're chiming in there, and I love that, and I hope that you will continue to do that. But I do want to talk to you about how it works. So there are a lot of us in this room because this is open to the public. At Kaplan, we like to keep our student to teacher ratio, 10 to 15 students for every one teacher, but this is the free week of GRE, and so this is actually a very, very big classroom, and we have a lot of teachers behind the scenes helping to answer questions and be there for you. So you should submit whatever you want to talk about, whatever questions you have, but you may not see it all come up on the public screen for everyone to see, just because there are so many things coming in. So if you don't see yourself publicly, don't worry. That doesn't mean that we didn't get it. It doesn't mean that you won't get answered or responded to. It just means that there were too many other things coming up that kind of filled up the public a little quicker. So no worries about that, but continue to post as much as you can. I love to see that as often as possible. And also, if you're having any trouble with the resolution, I'm told that there is a resolution options wheel button at the bottom of the video player, and that you can pick the resolution and the size of everything that you're seeing, so that if you're looking at the lesson, it looks a little too small for you, you can make it bigger. If it's big, you can make it a little smaller. If you want to see my face on your 4K TV extra big, you can do that as well. Whatever floats your boat. So make sure to use that as needed. But let's get started because it's time. The GRE has these sections. Those of you who've been studying for a while, I know you know this already. We have analytical writing, 2 essays that you need to write in 30 minutes. We have 2 scored quantitative sections, 2 scored verbal sections, and 1 experimental unscored section that can be either quant or verbal. I always like to start with this real brief overview because I always have newbies in my room. Shout out if you're brand new today. If you're just brand new to the GRE and this is your first toe dip into the chilly cold waters of GRE prep, I love to acknowledge y'all, and I want you to have a way to put this lesson into context, because if you're brand new, you may not know kind of where this lesson fits into all of the things that you need to do. So today's lesson is on quant comparison, which is where you get 2 amounts, right? It could be numbers, it could be linear equations. You'll get 2 of them and you'll be asked, is one greater than the other? Is one less than the other? Are they equal to each other? Or can you even tell based on the information that you've been given? And so that's the type of question we're working today. This is something unique to quantitative of the GRE and unique to the GRE specifically. You don't see these in other places, although you can compare them to inequalities a lot of times if you're familiar with inequalities. But I'm glad to see so many newbies. I love it. This lesson will run the gamut from a little easier questions to harder questions, but you will have an amazing teacher, one of the best, with you throughout the whole thing. So feel free, again, submit all those questions. You also have a private tutor and coach assigned to you so that your questions that get submitted will get answered by a GRE teacher, either on screen or in private or in public. You are going to get a lot of support. So ask those questions. I want you to get the most value out of this experience as possible. This is my favorite thing that we do throughout the year, is when we open up to the public for this free week of prep, because everyone is prepping in their own different ways at their own timelines. And this is just a great way for us to reach out and help as many students as possible. So we really want to do that. So don't be shy today. We look forward to helping you today and throughout this whole week. And shout out if you're going to be with us for the whole week. And if you haven't, or if you didn't know this was a whole week, we have the link right at the top of your screen. Just go ahead and click sign up for all of the events that you want to, or all of the events, period, and make sure that you come. We have 2 more practice tests coming. A note about those practice tests, they are the same test. So it's not that you should go to all, but that you should pick the one that works for you. If you've been studying for a while and you want to take the test and really get our feedback, I would take the test that is midweek. That way you still have time to reach out to me for coaching outside of class and ask me about your results or what you can do to fix that. If you are brand new, you might want to wait until the week is done and take the test at the end so that you can get the full benefit of not only learning some things, but getting some time to practice on the things that you've learned before you take the test. Because without practice, it's hard to get the benefit of something. So you might want to give yourself just a little bit more time to work with the methods that we're teaching you and these new question types, and then take that test at the end. And I'm so glad that so many of you are going to be staying with us. Again, this is one of my favorite things, and I'm just so excited to have you here. Now let's talk about scoring on the GRE. You will find, and you're going to see me writing in pink. So if you see like bright pink on the screen, that's me. And no, if you're wondering, pink is not my favorite color. My favorite color is yellow, but I do often write in pink because it's the easiest thing for you to see. So all of the pink is me. That's me in my terrible handwriting. You're going to find that your average GRE scores are 151 for verbal and a 153 for quantitative. Those of you who have been studying for a little while, though, tell me in my chat, are those low for what you're looking for? Are they high? Are they on target? Where do those numbers fall in terms of what you need for the programs that you're looking for? What do you think? And it's always all over the place. For some of us, these will be high, they'll be low, they'll be on target. One will be high, the other will be low, and vice versa. And that's because every program is different. And the key to this question, and the reason that I'm asking this, because I want to point out that you've got to do your research. You have to reach out to those schools and programs that you're interested in. You have to figure out what the average scores for their most recent class are. And you want to meet or beat those scores. That is your best way to get in. But you just have to figure out what it is that they're looking for, because your best way to get accepted is from your GRE score. Your best way to get scholarships is from your GRE score, and you got to meet or beat what they have in order to start being considered for those. So you got to do that research and figure it out, because just going by the average isn't going to work for you, because this average is going to include all of the people who didn't get in, unfortunately. It's going to include all of those people who had to retake the test because the first time or the second time or third time was too low for them. And it's going to include all of those people who didn't get into their choice program. So what you're looking for may be a little higher. And the only way to figure that out is by doing that research and figuring out what those programs are looking for. Now, in today's lesson, we are going to try and cover all of what I call the 3 pillars of test prep. So you really need a couple things to be ready. One of the things is you need new strategies, right? These tests are considered tests of the way that you think rather than what you know. So they're really not math tests and they're really not vocab tests. They're really testing the way that you think. They were used as leadership tests in the military before they were used for schools. And so they're really testing how you think. And the reason I want to highlight that is because I want you to know that it's actually very hard to change your score on these tests unless you learn a new way to think about the questions. And that's what we do here at Kaplan. And that's what we're going to start doing here today with you. So we're going to definitely have strategies, new ways to look at these questions. A lot of times, especially today's a quant lesson, a lot of times you can take the math from what looks like a very difficult level all the way down to 3rd grade math if you know what to look for and you know how to break the question down into its constituent elements. So we're definitely going to do that today. Another thing you're really going to need on the test is time management. Does anybody ever feel like they have enough time? Or has anybody ever felt like time is your enemy on this test? Because you should, because they've made it that way on purpose. They want to see again how you think. And if you are the type of person who thinks in the way that they're looking for, if you see those shortcuts, if you look for patterns and use them to your advantage, you will have the time that you need. But if you always approach things the long way, if you don't see patterns that well, and if you don't know to look for them, it's going to take you a lot longer per question and you will run out of time. Or sometimes people will say to me, oh, I don't have a timing issue. I finish all of the questions every single time. I'll say, well, that's awesome. And you have a perfect score then? Because if you don't have your perfect score yet and you're finishing everything on time, then you may also have a timing and pacing issue. You should be spending more time on certain questions so that you get them right. You should be spending less time on other questions that you're already getting right so that you have the time that you need. And yes, it is the fastest 35 minutes ever. Shout out to the student who said that. I totally agree. It feels like it goes really, 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 really fast. So we're going to definitely talk about time management and ways to more efficiently use your time in today's lesson. And the other thing that I think that you need most, or one of the top 3 things I think you need most, is focused practice. Sometimes people say, oh, practice makes perfect, but that's not necessarily true. I like this saying perfect practice makes perfect a lot better, because if you're practicing a strategy that is too inefficient, too slow, or is just quite frankly wrong, then what's going to happen is you are practicing bad habits over and over and over again. And so I love focus and guided practice, to where if you do something in a less efficient way, you have someone there to say, oh, here's something you can do to fix that, or point out like, oh, and the next time try it this way. And that's definitely what we're going to be doing today, because you will have a teacher with you, as well as all of your behind the scenes teachers, including me, throughout the whole lesson. And the reason I call myself a behind the scenes teacher is until it's time for coaching, when your coach Allie will return, I promise I will. Until it's time for that, it's time for me to go, because I am not teaching your lesson today. I promised you on Facebook, and I will promise you tomorrow or Tuesday on Instagram, and we've promised you all over the media platforms where you've seen this event listed and broadcasted. We've promised you the best teachers from Kaplan. And as much as I love to think I am the very, very best, there are teachers out there who are way even better. And I am so proud to be bringing one of them here for you today. He is a 2-time Kaplan Teacher of the Year, and Kaplan is worldwide international, and he is twice Teacher of the Year across all of the thousands of teachers that we have here at Kaplan. And I'm just so, so proud. He says that he loves strategy games, and he loves quant, and he loves the GRE, and he loves teaching students. And so I'm just so proud to introduce teacher Boris is here today to teach quant comparison. And I hope you enjoy his lesson. I can't wait to see you afterwards for coaching, where we're going to talk about best practices so that you avoid spinning your wheels. If you've ever felt like you're putting in more time than you're getting points out, we're going to fix that today. We're going to start fixing it today, because I'm going to help you to figure out what are the best ways to get points, and what are some of those practices that you should avoid if you want to get points as fast as you can. So I can't wait to see you afterwards for that. But now it is time for quant comparison with Boris. I look forward to seeing you after. Bye-bye. really not.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second portion of today's event in which we do a full hour-long lesson on quantitative comparison strategies. My name is Boris. I know you guys miss Allie because she is incredible on camera, and she will be back. So if you just sit through the lesson with me, you will get to see her again and work more with her on your GRE performance. Now, this session is all about the strategies for quantitative comparison, and I was really surprised how many of you responded so strongly when Allie asked, first of all, how many of you were new to the test. A lot of you are. And also, a lot of you said that time was your enemy. And so this is a really great lesson to be at if you either feel like you're running out of time all the time on the GRE, or if you feel like you just don't know anything about this test and you want a place to get started, because this is one of the question types that is always on the test. It's always the first 7 to 8 questions of the quant section will be this format, the quantitative comparison. And for many people, like I heard Allie say it was for her, it was for me as well. At first, it's like super weird and the question format's like, what the heck's going on here? But then as you learn some strategies for beating these questions, it suddenly becomes your absolute favorite question type. And now I'm like, man, I wish every single question on the GRE was a quantitative comparison because I've got these down so well. For those of you really concerned about timing, let me just say that there is a very close relationship between being good at solving problems and also being fast. It's not like those are separate things. Most of the time when people don't finish on time, it's because they sit there a lot being like, oh, geez, what should I do now? I have no idea. So if you know the strategies, a lot of the timing will come for free. And quantitative comparisons are all about strategies. I'm going to teach you 3 tonight. I'm going to teach you how to evaluate quantities piece by piece, how to make quantities look more similar to each other and therefore more easy to judge. And then also I'm going to show you a cool way of doing the same thing to both quantities so that you can again make it easier to compare them. Now just so you guys know, this is very far from a one-person show. While I am on camera and teaching the lesson from the camera, I'm not the only person here. So I'm joined behind the scenes by a lot of really incredible GRE teachers from Kaplan. So Heather is behind the scenes and she is our green light person. What that means is that whenever you type something into the chat, Heather sees it first and decides where it goes. So if you type something in the chat and don't see it, I promise you someone has read it. We're not ignoring you. It's just that there's a lot of you guys here, so we don't want to let everything get through. If you ask a question in the chat, it probably will not get posted to everybody. Instead, either Steve, Julia, Jessica, or Rohit are going to answer your question. So we have 4 teachers behind the scenes. One of them has been assigned to you based on your name, and they'll respond to the questions that you ask. So we see everything that you type, I promise, and we will be there answering your questions behind the scenes if you have. Jessica requests that I teach her my ways, Sensei. Well, I think that's a good indicator as any, though. We can get cracking here and start, of course, in the most logical place. Let's learn the format of a quantitative comparison. Let's see what we've actually got. So on test day, you're going to be given some information in the middle here. You're going to be given 2 quantities. Now, your job is to figure out which quantity is bigger, if they're both the same, or if it depends. Like, given a certain variable, A is bigger, but given another variable, B is bigger. Or if X is one thing, they're the same, but if X is something different, then they're not the same. So that's choice D. Now, Allie, who is amazing on camera, is also amazing off camera, and she's going to be managing the polls. So when we have a question coming up, she can open a poll, and then you will be able to vote in the poll for the answer choice that you think is correct. And then Allie will let me know like what % of people are voting for which answer, so that way I can tailor my teaching to what you guys are thinking the answer is. Okay, so that is the format. Now let's take a look at this question. So this one tells us that Jerome has 6 $1 bills and 3 $5 bills. Now that's some pretty easy math. Let me know in the chat, folks. Tell me, please, how much money does Jerome have in his wallet right now? So we take, okay, he's got 6 $1 bills, that's 6 times 1, plus 3 times $5 bills. All right, that's 3 times 5, so that's 15. So we got 6 plus 15, Jerome's got 21 bucks. So feel free to try out the poll that Allie has now opened. Vote for the choice that you would pick on test day, given the format of this question. All right, well, 21 is quantity A, and 20 is quantity B. So A is bigger than B. That means that we pick choice A for awesome, click it, confirm it, and move on test day. One thing that's great about quantitative comparisons is that the answer choices never ever change. And right now, this may seem like a really weird way to ask a question, but don't confuse being uncomfortable with being incapable. Just because this feels weird now doesn't mean that you can't do it on test day. On test day, you will. So we're going to click that choice and move on. Now, I got a little bit of a plot twist here. You would probably never see a question like this on test day, because pretty much all you have to do here is calculate how much money Jerome has in his wallet. If the GRE wants to ask a question like this, chances are they'll just ask it as a problem-solving question and ask you to calculate how much money Jerome has. When the test makers write quantitative comparisons, it is usually because they want you to think about the problem cleverly and strategically. And so that's why knowing the strategies is so important. Like Ali said, if you approach every question the wrong way, the slow way, the direct way, if you don't see the patterns and the right way of thinking that the GRE is looking for, then you are going to spend too much time on the problem. That may seem like a scary thing, but the good thing is that absolutely it is possible to learn the right way to look at these questions and the right way to find the patterns. So the very first strategy that I'm going to show you is called comparing the quantities piece by piece. So the idea is that you don't let the quantities intimidate you. Instead, you check each component of the quantity and compare it to the corresponding component of the other quantity. Then after you've made all your judgments, you decide what's going on. I'm going to do the first question with you. The remaining two questions for the strategy, I'm going to let you try entirely on your own. Maybe you'll get them right, maybe you'll get them wrong. It doesn't matter. You want to practice and take this opportunity to learn from your mistakes if you make them, or congratulate yourself for your successes if you got them right. So here we go. In this quantity, we have a -3, quantity A, and in quantity B, we have a -5. All right, a little bit of review of negative numbers here. Which is bigger, -3 or -5? Right, you got to remember for negatives, the closer to 0 it is, the bigger it is. -3 is closer to 0 than -5 is. It's like you're less in debt. So -3 is a bigger number. And I love these animations right here. Whoop, there we go. So we get a plus sign under the -3 and a minus under the -5 to indicate that in one case, quantity A had a bigger component than quantity B. Now that doesn't mean that quantity A is bigger. We can't just stop here. We have to compare all of the components. So I see Brett's working with me. Very nice, Neha. J-Chu is on it. Very nice. So you guys got your negative numbers down. Perfect. Let's take a look at the next components. X and 2y. All right, so this time, which one is bigger? This is a place where if there wasn't any centered information, you'd want to just stop and pick choice D because it's like, well, I don't know which one's bigger. But we do have centered information that's quite relevant here. We are told that X is greater than 2y. So we know that X is greater than 2y, that the component of quantity A is bigger than the corresponding component of quantity B. So another slick plus and minus sign pairing appears. Next up, we got to compare X squared to 4y squared. So let me know in the chat, what do you think? Who's bigger, X squared or 4y squared? So this one's a tricky one. However, you might notice that X squared is kind of present because we do have a thing about X, and we square it, we get X squared. Well, if you take 2y and you square it, you get 4y squared using the rules of exponents. So that means that X squared is greater than 4y squared because X is greater than 2y. So if you square both sides of that inequality, you will get that X squared is greater than 4y squared. That completes the process. We now know that every single component of quantity A is greater than every single component of quantity B, and so we can confidently click on choice A for awesome, confirm it, and move on with the GRE. Now there's other ways to do this problem. You could make up numbers for X and Y, and you could plug them in, and you could do a whole bunch of different tests, and then you see that A always comes out bigger, so you pick A. But that's slower than what we just did. This is the light at the end of the tunnel. For those of you who fear that time is just always going to get you. For those of you who haven't done math in like 8 years and you're afraid that you're way too rusty. It's not really about math here. It's about learning some new strategies. So you need to learn them just like someone who's just done math yesterday and needs to learn them. Everybody needs to learn the right way to do these strategies. You're on the same footing as anybody else, and you can absolutely conquer this test. All right, so now I'm going to ask for a couple of things. Ali, who is amazing, is going to reset the poll and bring up another poll for this next question. I'm also going to ask someone who I haven't mentioned yet, Steve, to set up a timer for 1.5 minutes. Now, Steve's job is very important. If my computer explodes, Steve is going to come on and teach the rest of the lesson. So Steve will be doing that, and he's also going to help me make a timer for 1.5 minutes. So folks, take 1.5 minutes, try this next question entirely on your own, and then vote in Allie's poll when you are done. Remember, you can keep asking questions. They won't appear, but somebody will answer them. So Julia or Rohit will answer your question. We also have Jessica and Steve behind the scenes who are answering questions. So please ask if you have any questions. We are here to help you. All right, guys, I'll see you back here in 1.5 minutes. Enjoy the practice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's review this question. I saw, by the way, there were some great comments coming in. I saw Carla say, I initially wanted to factor these, and I also saw Brittany say, I never would have thought of this strategy. One of the great things about the GRE is that the GRE doesn't care if you thought of it on your own or if you know it because you went to Kaplan's free GRE prep week. Like, it doesn't make any difference. All that matters is that you know how to do it on test day. I say this because I don't want anybody beating themselves up when they practice the GRE. Like, even after we're in your past, I want you to take this with you forever, that like you should never beat yourself up and be like, oh, I should have known how to do that, or oh, I should have gotten that right. Like, no, you shouldn't have. You shouldn't have known. You shouldn't have gotten it right. You should have made that mistake in practice in order to avoid making it on test day. So now let's take a look at quantities A and B. We know that X is a negative number, right? This is the only piece of information that we have, and it's got to be an important piece of information. So tell me please in the chat, what do I know about the number X to the 5th power? Like, what must be true about that number? So you do have to know some of your properties, right? And one of the things that you'll do is you'll review all the various little properties that can come up on the GRE. And if you take a class with us or use a book that's for the GRE, you'll definitely see all of these. When you take a negative number and raise it to an odd power, you get another negative number. And that makes sense if you think about it. Like if I do -1 cubed, right, that would be like -1 times -1 times -1. And 2 of those negative signs would cancel, but the third one would be left. So I'd be left with a -1 in the end. So I know for an absolute fact that x to the 5 is negative. So is x cubed, right? They're both negative numbers raised to odd powers. And you can see where this is going, right? Because in quantity B, they're raised to even powers. If you take a negative number, raise it to an even power, it turns positive. So we have 2 positives and 2 negatives, and they're in different quantities. Now, we also know, of course, all right, I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence by asking about that. We also know that 3 is bigger than 2. So it doesn't matter how rusty you are. I'm pretty confident you know that 3 is bigger than 2. So again, like I saw someone mention earlier, this is like game changer strategy. Like, yeah, it's super helpful to think of it this way instead of trying all sorts of random stuff. This is one of those things the GRE loves to renew, reuse, recycle. They consistently set up problems that are amenable to this exact way of thinking about a question, comparing piece by piece. Now here, of course, every part of B is bigger than every part of A, which means we get to pick my personal favorite GRE answer choice of all time. That would be choice B for Boris. Let's click that answer choice, confirm it, and move on with the GRE. I'm going to give you one more of these that can be solved by comparing piece by piece, and I'm going to let you try it entirely on your own. Again, if you get a question right, awesome. If you don't get it right, good. Better to get it wrong now than to get it wrong on test day. So here we go. If you'd be so kind, Steve, please give us another minute and a half. Folks, take 90 seconds. Try this question entirely on your own and vote in Allie's poll when you're done. When time is up, we're going to review it like there ain't nothing to it. I'll see you guys soon. All right, folks, so it's time for a little confession. I know that the previous problems that we did were kind of nice in that they were perfect. Every single component of one quantity was bigger than every single component of the other quantity. And I know that there's a lot of you out there thinking, well, what happens if we get a split? And that does happen on test day on the more challenging quantitative comparisons. So we got to see one here. So in this problem, there were some parts of it that were pretty straightforward, right? Clearly, 5 is bigger than 4. And 3x and 3x are the same. But then when you got to 2x squared versus x squared, right? That one had it where the 2x squared was definitely bigger than the x squared. So now we had a split, right? We had a plus, an equals, and a minus in both quantities. So what do you do on test day when that happens? Well, one thing you can do is you can think how much bigger is each plus than each minus. So we know that 5 is bigger than 4 by 1. How about 2x squared versus x squared? Folks, how much bigger is 2x squared than x squared? Well, it's twice as big, right? You have x squared versus 2x squared. 2x squared is twice as big as regular old x squared without the 2. So we have to ask ourselves on test day, like, if that's twice as big, is that more or less than just the 1 difference between a 4 and a 5? And here the answer is that's definitely more than a 1 difference, because x is a number bigger than 1. If you take a number that's bigger than 1 and you square it, and then you also double it, the difference when you double it is going to be way bigger than 1. So yeah, Esther, J. Chu, Nicolette, very nice, folks. The fact that this is twice as big is significant because it means that quantity A wins the tug of war between quantity A and quantity B. We can click that choice on test day, confirm it, and move on. Now, one thing I like to do whenever possible is to show a question in 2 different ways. There's another way to see this. If you're like, I'm not quite sure, we can write 2x squared as x squared plus x squared. Hopefully we can all agree on that, right? If you take x squared plus x squared, combine like terms, that's 2x squared. And so now it makes it really easy to tell, again, that quantity A is bigger than quantity B. Because now we can, ignore the x squareds in quantity A and quantity B, and we're left comparing x squared to 1. You can definitely tell that x squared is greater than 1, which means that quantity A, again, has to be bigger. X squared is going to be a lot more bigger than 1 than 5 is bigger than 4. Now, I'm not going to lie and say that that's easy. That's a problem that takes some practice and takes some review. So there's going to be questions where it's like, I got to really work my brain a little bit. But that's what practice is for. You do that practice by test day. It's like, oh yeah, x squared is bigger than 1. I'm done. I'm out of here. Click choice A for awesome and move on with the GRE. Okay, now there are also those of you right now thinking, well, what if it's not going to work? Like, what if I do get a problem? I've seen them in my practice where I can't just evaluate piece by piece. That is where our two other strategies come in. And the next one is called making the quantities look alike. So the idea behind this strategy is that we put ourselves in the mind of the test maker. What's the test maker going to do? What's the GRE going to do? The GRE is going to do its best to make the quantities look as different from each other as possible. So the GRE might take two things that are very close, but then like do all kinds of weird stuff to them in order to make them look very different, and boom, a problem is born. So if we can undo that process, then we can see very clearly which of the quantities is bigger. So let's take a look at this example. All right, we know that each side of square t has a length of s. Let's just draw that, shall we? So there's square t. Each side of square t has a length of s. We're told that the perimeter of t is p. Now hold on a second. Folks, what is another way that we can express the perimeter of this square now that we have actually drawn a picture? So it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I haven't had math in 12 years. What's perimeter? Oh my goodness. And you do have to memorize some of these properties as you go into the GRE. Perimeter of a shape is the sum of all the sides. So this time we have four sides. Each one of them has a length of s. So it's s plus s plus s plus s, or just 4s is the perimeter. So we have actually two ways of writing the perimeter. We can say the perimeter is p because that's what the question said, or we can say it's 4s because we can figure that out. And we can do a similar thing with the area. We're told the area is A, which is great, but there is another way that we can express the area. Oh man, I see a lot of you guys saw that P was 4S. Beautifully done, Alexis and Desiree and everybody. Yes, and then what is another way that we can express the area of this square? So again, if you forgot what the area of a square is, if you forgot that formula, don't beat yourself up. It's important to identify what you don't know when you practice for the GRE. You don't go into it thinking you know everything. There's got to be things you don't know, so thank goodness you found them out before you took the test. Very nice, Desiree. Excellent, Nicolette. Yes. The area of a square is one side times another side. So in this case, that's s times s, or s squared. So we can say two different ways of expressing the area. We are told the area is A, because it just said so in the middle, but we also know that s squared is the area. So here is where the strategy of making the quantities look alike comes into play. Right now in quantities A and B, we have a P, we have an A, and we have an S. But what's the point of having three different variables if all of these variables come back and get tied down to an S? Let's replace the P with 4S, because we know that those are the same thing. And let's replace the a with s squared because we know that those are the same thing. So notice I've made no change to quantity a. I've just written it in a way that's exactly the same. 4s instead of p, s squared instead of a. Now folks, let me know in the chat, what do you see when you write quantity a that way, unlike the way that it was originally written? We have an s on top, and we have a couple of s's on the bottom, which means that we can actually cancel an s from the top and bottom of the fraction. So now quantity a becomes 4 over s, because the s on top got canceled with one of the two s's on the bottom. I'm not going to insult your intelligence here, because I think we all can see this, right? We have 4s in quantity a, 4 over s in quantity b. These two quantities are actually exactly the same. So let's grab choice C for champions, click it, confirm it, and move on with the GRE. So in this case, when we tried to make the quantities look alike, they ended up being exactly alike. However, choice C is not always going to be the answer. So what happens if the answer is A, B, or maybe even D? Well, the strategy still works, and you're going to find that out when you try this next question entirely on your own. So Steve, if you'd be so kind, please give us a timer for 1.5 minutes. Folks, take 90 seconds to try this relatively challenging question entirely on your own, and vote in the poll that Allie's brings up when you are done. If you're stumped, don't feel bad. It is a challenging question, so if you're stumped, good. Better now than on test day. And I'm going to show you every step of the way how to beat this problem when time is up. Good luck and enjoy the question, everybody. All right, folks, let's review this question. I saw a comment as the problem was being worked on. Carla said, these are the ones that hurt my brain when I took the GRE. And Jessica had said, woof! I would rather just use numbers and letters and symbols keep to themselves. I know, and that's exactly why the GRE will do this to you, because the test makers know that a lot of people feel that way. And this was a difficult problem. I'm not just saying that it's difficult to make you feel good if you got it right. We had a little bit under half of us voting for choice B, over a quarter of us voting for choice C, and A and D each got 1/10 of the vote. So this was a very split problem, and that's exactly what I love to see when I teach, is I want to see a lot of the students getting something wrong, because that means I got something I can show you that's going to help you do better on the GRE. So here is how we can beat the test makers when they think they can intimidate us with letters and symbols. The first thing to notice is that there is a unifying theme to the centered information. Both of these equations have a W in them. That is your tip-off that you can make the quantities look alike. Because instead of having an x in quantity B and a y in quantity A, you know for an absolute fact that you can replace those x's and y's with w's. All you have to do is solve each equation for w instead of having it solved for y and for x. So let me know in the chat, folks. If you take that first equation, x equals 1/3 w, and rewrite it so that it is solved for y, let me know in the, or sorry, solved for w, what do you get? Well, you multiply both sides of the equation by 3, and then you get w equals 3x. Hey, that's convenient. So apparently quantity B is just w. Then for the second equation, right, we have, and again, just a single step is all it takes to solve that equation for w. We can square both sides. So we're going to have w equals y squared. When you square a y, it becomes y squared. When you square a square root, they cancel, and it just turns into a w. So now you know that w equals y squared. Okay, but here the GRE made it a little bit more difficult. It doesn't immediately turn into something handy in quantity A, because quantity A's got this stuff going on here with the y minus 3 and the y plus 3. Now, I know there's at least a few mathematicians out there who know what this is called. Let me know in the chat, step forward, my math wizards. What do you call it when you have this sort of a pattern of y minus 3 times y plus 3? This is a difference of squares. And so when you have something minus something and then something plus something, and it's the same two somethings both times, it just ends up being y squared minus the other thing squared. So in this case, y squared minus 3 squared, which is y squared minus 9. Now, if you didn't know that, don't feel bad. You're not supposed to know it, right? That's what the practice portion of your road to the GRE is for. But make sure that you study this, make sure that you make a flashcard for it, and memorize this pattern of the difference of squares, and you can instantly get an answer on test day. This is y squared minus 9. Very nice, Deirdre, you got this. Now, I saw a lot of other folks say FOIL. If you said this was FOIL, awesome, you can totally FOIL that out, and you will get the same answer, I promise. It's just a little bit faster if it's a difference of squares, but FOIL will give you the answer. So this is y squared minus 9. Now, check it out. We know that w equals y squared. We have a y squared right here, right? It's right there. So we can just replace that y squared with a w. So quantity A is w minus 9. Quantity B is just w like we found. Now at this point, we just got to ask one critical thinking question. What's bigger, w or w minus 9? Well, I don't know what w is, to be honest with you. But I do know that if you take a number and you take 9 away from it, it's going to get smaller. If I have some number of dollars and you don't know how many dollars I have, you do know that if I paid $9 for something, then I would not have as much money as I used to. So w has to be bigger than w minus 9. For that reason, we're going to go ahead and click my personal favorite GRE answer choice, choice B for Boris. Click it, confirm it, and move on with the GRE. Now let me know in the chat if you were really frustrated because you missed this piece of information at the beginning of this problem. The x equals 1/3 w. I saw quite a few folks earlier say like, oh, I missed the x equals 1/3 w in the beginning, and now of course it all makes sense. If that happened to you, I beg you please do not beat yourself up, because this is what I did a lot in my GRE preparation, and I really wish I hadn't. I would be like, oh, I should have known that. Oh, I'm so stupid. You know, how am I this dumb? Blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. Instead, think about it like this. That mistake was waiting for me. That mistake was waiting for me, and it was going to happen in one of two places. It was going to happen to me at Kaplan Free GRE Prep Week, and I was going to just like make it and then learn from it and never make it again, or it was going to happen on my test day and ruin my score, right? Those are the two options. So whenever you make a dumb mistake in practice, the dumber, the better, because it's in practice, doesn't hurt you. And if it's a dumb mistake, it's a mistake you can easily correct. So now you know, look for the centered information a little bit more closely when doing quantitative comparisons. That's a really good lesson to learn. You've got it now, you're going to do better at these problems. That is a good thing. There is nothing to be mad at yourself for when you're doing these questions. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that bit of practice on making the quantities look alike. I'm going to give you the most challenging one for this segment. So this would be a relatively high tier GRE math question. So if you'd be so kind, Steve, please bring us back another minute and a half on the clock. Folks, take 90 seconds, see what the heck you can make of this crazy question, and if you get an answer, vote in Allie's poll. When time is up, we're going to review it like there ain't nothing to it. All right, I'm going to see you guys soon. Enjoy the practice. Ladies and gentlemen, let's review this question. I love the comments you guys are putting in the chat. So I saw Ashley say, these are the ones that make my brain immediately come to a halt. And Ashley, you speak for thousands of people because that's what the GRE is trying to do, honestly. The test makers are like, oh, I bet if we make a problem that looks like this, then there's just going to be some people who freak out and get stumped. The thing is that you can do this question. You can actually do it. And so it's a shame if you freeze up and don't do it when in fact you can. I like to think of questions like this as paper tigers, right? Paper tiger looks scary, but it's made out of paper. It's not actually that bad. One thing that helped me a lot is just whenever I felt that brain freezing up happening at the beginning of a question, I would just close my eyes, take a deep breath, and I would look at the problem one more time. And I would try to make a reasonable judgment. Like, okay, is this problem actually difficult and I actually don't know how to do it? Or is it just look scary and I feel tired by looking at it? If it just looks scary, then I'm going to do this thing one step at a time until I get the answer. So here we have it that y, x, and z are all bigger than 1, but we also have this piece of information. Y equals z. Now that's super interesting because we have y's and z's in quantity A and quantity B, but there's no reason for it, right? What's the point? They're the same value, so I might as well just replace one with the other. You're going to see in the animations that we end up replacing all the z's with y's. You could just as well replace all the y's with z's. It doesn't matter how you do it, but that's your first step to making these quantities look alike, is just getting rid of one of the variables. So okay, let's go ahead and put a y everywhere we see a z. And I'm going to do a little bit of action with my pointer tool so you guys can see what happens to each one. In quantity A, not much changes, right? Because there's no z's here, and there's no z's in here. There's no z's in here. There's just two z's there. Okay, so let me know in the chat, folks, if I have x squared times y times z squared, but I don't want to have any z's in there anymore, what's going to be the power on my y? Right, I have y times z, but I want to replace the z's with y's. What's the power on my y there? this ends up being y cubed because z squared ends up being y squared, and y squared times y is y cubed. Okay, so quantity A, that one we can replace very easily. Quantity B is a tough one because everything's got z's in it, and so we have to look at each one very closely. Now, the first one is exactly the same as the last one that we just did, right? That's y times z squared. A lot of you guys just told me, Tao told me, and Tamer told me, and Maria told me that this is y cubed, so we're good to go there. We actually end up getting the exact same thing happening over here. Oh man, this is great. So we have y times z squared. You guys know the drill. That is y cubed. Okay, the bottom, still the same thing, because that is y times y, when you replace the z with a y. It is still y cubed, so everything ends up being y cubed except for this one right here. Let me know in the chat, folks, real quick, what's the power on y when you replace all the z's with y's for the term that I've got highlighted right now? Well, when you replace the z with a y, you get x times y, and y times y is y squared. Okay, so in quantity B, it didn't actually end up being as bad as we thought, because pretty much everything was y cubed, except for the y squared over there at the end. Okay, so now we've made the quantities look more alike. And I saw earlier in the chat, oh, I wish I could remember who said it, someone said, now we can compare piece by piece. And that's actually what Arisha said. This question's easier piece by piece. Yes, because at this point, we can start comparing piece by piece. There's a lot of pieces that are the same, right? You might notice the denominator of both fractions are the same. Both of them on top have an x squared y cubed. Those are the same. And both of them on top of an xy squared. Those are the same. So the only thing that's different ends up being those terms in the middle. We got an xy squared in quantity A and an xy cubed in quantity B. So folks, which of those is bigger? Xy squared or xy cubed? Well, that could be D, and I saw a few folks did vote for choice D on this one, if the test makers had not told us that all of these were greater than 1. And if you voted for D, I got to give you my congratulations, because that means you were thinking, like, oh, what if y is a decimal? Then cubing it actually makes it smaller. But in this particular case, the test makers told us that they're all bigger than 1, and if you take a number bigger than 1 and cube it, it's going to be bigger than if you square it. So this is time once again to grab my personal favorite choice, that is choice B for Boris. Click it, confirm it, and move on with the GRE. So, at this point, I'm going to take a little bit of a break, breathe and digest. So quantitative comparisons, initially, very scary topic. A lot of people have trouble with it. Timing on the GRE, very scary topic. A lot of people have trouble with it. But now we've seen two pretty cool strategies for dealing with quantitative comparisons and dealing with them quickly. One of them is comparing piece by piece. So you look at a piece in quantity A, compare it to a piece in quantity B, and you're like, hey, which of these is bigger? So you mark that down, and then at the end you decide what to do. The other strategy that comes up when comparing piece by piece doesn't work is to try to make the quantities look more similar by replacing some of the variables with other variables, or just by rearranging how things look in each quantity. And then sometimes that allows you to compare piece by piece, even if you couldn't initially. And we all agree that comparing piece by piece is awesome. So if we can do that, then we can get the right answer. Now, some of you are thinking, oh boy, well, what's the third strategy? Well, there are times on the GRE where the test makers will set up a question, so you cannot make the quantities look similar to each other by doing things to them independently. But what you can do is make them look more similar to each other by doing the same thing to both. So don't worry, this is not like a new strategy that you have to learn. Instead, the idea here is that we do the same thing to both quantities so that they look more similar to each other. I'm going to do a question with you, and I'm going to give you a couple of questions to try entirely on your own. Let's take a look at quantity A and quantity B here. Quantity A is m plus 3 over m squared minus 1, and quantity B is m plus 3 over m squared plus m minus 2. Now this is a pretty tough problem because to do it, you do have to know your factoring rules. So it's one of those advanced algebra things that you do have to know how to do to make some progress. If you don't, that's okay. On test day, just skip this problem. Not every problem requires advanced algebra. If it's practice, go back and learn some of those properties, and in fact, I'll show you how to do that right now. So here, in the bottom of quantity A, we have an m squared minus 1. This ends up being, actually, a difference of squares like we saw before. So my mathematicians, please step forward and let me know in the chat, what is the factored form of m squared minus 1? This will be m plus 1 times m minus 1. And so we can go ahead and make that replacement. Now, let's look at quantity b. We have m squared plus m minus 2. When you factor a quadratic like this, what you're really looking for are two magic numbers. When the two magic numbers are multiplied, they should multiply to the number on the outside. So here that is a -2. And they should add to the number in the middle. So here that is just a 1. Oh, by the way, I'm looking in the chat. Desiree, Nicolette, Jillian, Malika, a lot of you guys knew your difference of squares. Very nice. Coming to prep week prepared. Fantastic to see that. So here, folks, let me know in the chat in quantity B, what are the two magic numbers that if you multiply them, give you -2, and if you add them, give you +1? Oh man, a lot of you guys knew that difference of squares. Excellent. I urge everybody to practice that property, the difference of squares, and memorize it stone cold by testing, because it's super handy, like in this problem. Right. +2 and -1. 2 plus -1 is 1, so they add to give the number in the middle. 2 times -1 is -2, so they multiply to give you the number on the outside. Once you find those magic numbers, that's how you factor. So here it'll be m plus 2 times m minus 1. And at this point, if all we had was comparing piece by piece and making the quantities look more alike, we'd kind of be stumped here because there's not much you can do to each quantity individually. But there are things that we can do to both quantities to make them look more similar than they are right now. So let me know in the chat, if this was, say, an equal sign in between these two quantities, or a greater than sign, or a less than, right? If it was like an equation or an inequality, but I don't know which one it is yet, I would be allowed to do the same thing to both sides. So what's something that I could do to both sides to make this mystery equation or inequality a little bit more simplified than it looks right now? There's several different things that I could do. One thing I could do is I could multiply both sides by m plus 1. That way the m minus 1. That way the m minus 1 on both denominators would get canceled out. Another thing that I could do is I could divide both sides by m plus 3. Ivory, cyber high five, props to you. Yes, you can multiply m minus 1 to both sides. Exactly. Another thing I could do is I could divide both sides by m plus 3 because they both have an m plus 3, so that would just end up getting canceled. So now I have 1 over m plus 1 in quantity A and 1 over m plus 2 in quantity B. Honestly, at this point, I can take it a step further. So I can multiply both sides by m plus 2. I'm going to write this carefully on the screen so you can see what actually happens when I do this. If I multiply both sides by m plus 2, then on the right side in quantity B, the m plus 2 cancels out, and we're just left with 1, basically, because everything got canceled out. On the left side in quantity A, though, we have an m plus 2 floating around, right? So we have an m plus 2 is just sort of like hanging out there. Then we can multiply both sides by m plus 1, and the same thing happens. On the left in quantity A, the m plus 1 cancels, and on the right in quantity B, this 1 gets replaced with an m plus 1, because 1 times m plus 1 is m plus 1. So what's left with now is m plus 2 in quantity A and m plus 1 in quantity B. We got here by doing the same thing to both sides until they both looked as simple to each other as possible. Now you tell me, what is bigger, m plus 2 or m plus 1? Well, if you take a number and you add 2, it's going to be bigger than if you take the number and only add 1. So we know that m plus 2 is bigger. We're going to click choice A for awesome, confirm it, and move on with the GRE. Do note, by the way, that if you wanted to, you could take it a step further. You could subtract m from both sides, right? If you subtract m from both sides, you're just left with 2 and 1, and okay, you know that 2 is greater than 1. So you may even have been doing this without realizing it on previous problems, but you're totally allowed to do that. You're allowed to add, subtract, divide, or multiply both quantities in a quantitative comparison, and then that way both quantities look more simple and you can get an answer. There's just one twist when you do this. When you do this strategy, you have to make sure that what you're multiplying and dividing by is positive. Here we knew that it was all positive because we knew that m was greater than 1. But I'm going to show you a problem where you don't have that information, and that definitely changes what happens when you do the same thing to both quantities. Just like in an inequality, if you multiply or divide both sides of an inequality by a negative number, the sign flips. You cannot multiply both sides of a quantitative comparison by a negative number because you don't know what the sign is originally, so you don't know what you're supposed to flip it to. So when you're multiplying or dividing, it's got to be positive. Keep that in mind as you try this next question entirely on your own. If you'd be so kind, Steve, please give us one of your famous 1.5-minute timers. Folks, please take 90 seconds to try this question entirely on your own, keeping in mind what I just said, and voting in Allie's poll. When time is up, we're going to review it like there ain't nothing to it, and I'll show you some more cool tricks for beating quantitative comparisons on the GRE. All right, guys, I'm going to see you soon. Enjoy the practice. Ladies and gentlemen, let's review this question. So one of the things that your heart's probably going to cry out to do the moment that you see this on test day is multiply both quantities by c, because then the c's just cancel out, and we're left with a and b. Now the standard information tells us that a is greater than b, so pick choice A for awesome, confirm it and move on, right? Well, not quite. Tell me please in the chat, what is the problem with just saying, look, multiply both sides by c, the c's cancel, and a is greater than b? What's the issue that happens when you do that? There's a little bit of a smoke and mirror show going on here. The test makers do tell you that a and b are both positive numbers. The thing is, I don't care if they're positive. I don't care if they're greater than 0 or negative. All I care about is that a is greater than b. But what the test makers don't tell you is that c is a positive number. The only thing the test makers tell you about c is that it is not equal to 0. So it could be negative. So now let's think about what happens if c is positive and what happens if it's negative. If it's positive, then a is greater than b, like we just said. But if it's negative, then the inequality sign essentially flips. So now what actually happens is that a is less than b. And if you're sitting there like, oh, my brain's hurting, why? Think about it like this. All right, if I have something like 5 over negative 1, and then on the other side I have 3 over negative 1, right? You see how that ends up working? If I look at these two numbers, one of them is negative 5, and the other one is negative 3. So actually 5 is less than negative 3, even though positive 5 is greater than positive 3. So you always have to keep this in mind. When you do the same thing to both quantities, just take a peek at the standard information and make sure that what you're multiplying or dividing both sides by is actually positive. If it's not, then either A, you just aren't allowed to do it, or B, you can do it with the intent of proving that choice D for domination is the correct answer. Because C could be positive, in which case A is bigger, but C could also be negative, in which case B is bigger. Since both possibilities are possible, we grab this choice and move on. And by the way, I love what Elizabeth just put in the chat. Elizabeth put lol, that most definitely got me. And I love that lol at the beginning. That's the kind of attitude you want to have, like, ha, GRE, you got me. Never again, right? Because now you're never going to fall for the same trick twice. You want to expose yourself to as many of the test maker's tricks as possible in practice. On test day, when your competition's falling flat on their face on every single trap they see, you're going to be nimbly dodging them like a fox because you already went through all that experience in your practice. And Arvind is absolutely correct. You don't have enough information to tell. If you were wondering, hey, when do I pick choice D? This is when it's possible to go both ways. All right, folks, you know what time it is. It's time to do one more question. We did 3 questions for each strategy, and this is our final question of the teaching portion of this event. If you'd be so kind, Steve, please give us another minute and a half. Folks, take 90 seconds to try this question entirely on your own. Vote in the poll that Ali provides for the answer choice you'd pick on test day, and then we're going to review it like there ain't nothing to it. All right, I'm going to see you guys soon. Enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's review this problem. So this one is the GRE's attempt to defy all of our strategies. It's kind of hard to tell what to compare piece by piece. It's also hard to do anything to each column individually because they're both pretty darn simple as it is. I see Taylor and Alicia are both like, darn it, different denominators lost me. So here's what you want to do. First of all, get rid of fractions whenever you can, because fractions are the worst. There's never been a person in the history of life who was like, oh, this situation would be great, but if only we had some fractions, it would be even better. So if you're stumped on what to do on the GRE, at least as just like a matter of course, get rid of the fractions that are there. So in this case, to get rid of the fractions, we're going to have to multiply both quantities by 6 and by C. But check to make sure, guys, are we allowed to multiply both quantities by C? Because that is a variable, and we ran into some problems with that last time. Yes, we know that A is bigger than B, which is bigger than C, which is bigger than 1. So these are all positive numbers. So yes, I'm allowed to multiply both quantities by 6 and by C. In quantity A, when I multiply by 6, the 6's cancel. And when I multiply by C, it gets tacked on. So I have A times B times C. In quantity B, when I multiply both quantities by C, the C's cancel, but the 6 is still there. So I have 4 times 6, which is 24. So at this point on test day, let's think about how 24 compares to ABC. Tell me please in the chat, what's the smallest that you can do for A, B, and C? How low can you go? The lowest that you can possibly go for C is 2, because it does tell us that all these variables are integers. By the way, don't assume that on the GRE. Never assume a variable is a whole number. Never assume that a variable is positive. But here we are told that they're all integers. So we know that the smallest integer greater than 1 is 2, while b is greater than c. So the smallest b can be is 3, and a is greater than b, so the smallest a can be is 4. So the smallest possible value is very nice. Rena, Nicolette, Rajesh, yeah, it's 4, 3, and 2. You take those and you multiply them together and you get 24. Now this tells us a couple of things. Number one, it tells us that a and b are not the answer, right? Because 24 in quantity A now equals 24 in quantity B. And so we know that either these two quantities are equal or it depends, right? We know for sure that A is not bigger than B because here's a case where A wasn't bigger. And we know that B is not bigger than A because here's a case where B wasn't bigger. The question is, folks, and this is my last strategic question to you, is it always going to be the case that A, B, and C are 4, 3, and 2? This is the one last trick to this question. It's very tempting to be like, yay, they're equal, choice C for champions, go! But A, B, and C could be anything, right? A could be 24 all by itself, right? Like, A could be 15 Gerbildillion for all I know. So they don't have to be 4, 3, and 2. They can be anything. In fact, if they're anything else, the result will be bigger than 24. So they can be equal, which means A and B are not right. But they don't have to be equal, so C is not right. And that leaves us with just one choice, choice D for domination. And we're going to click that choice, confirm it, and move on with the GRE. So at this point, we've seen 3 strategies. One was to compare piece by piece, and one was to make the quantities look more alike. We also found that sometimes the problems are built to resist those strategies. In that case, often the key to unlocking the question is to do the same thing to both quantities. This might allow you to then compare piece by piece, or it might enable you to make the quantities look more alike and then make your strategic comparison. Now, a lot of you have been asking if you can have a PDF of these problems. And the answer is yes. Not only can we give you a PDF of these problems, but we can actually give you some bonus problems for additional practice along the same subject. And the PDF actually contains detailed explanations for all of these questions, as well as some additional notes. To get that PDF, all you got to do is put your email address in the poll that will appear when Allie comes back on, and that will be your cue to us that you'd like us to email you the notes from tonight's session and some other great information as well. Thank you guys so much for having me. It has been a pleasure working with you on quantitative comparisons. I hope that I've at least shown you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a way to practice and a way to go about doing these problems so that you can, by test day, be ready for the sorts of thinking and pattern recognition that the GRE is looking for. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Allie. Have a great night, you guys, and enjoy Kaplan's free GRE prep week.
Hi, hello again. How are you? How did you love it? How did you love it? Can we just start with that? How awesome is Boris? A for awesome, B for Boris, or A for Allie, you know, however you want to think about it. Isn't he great? I tell you what, can you just not see exactly why he got Teacher of the Year 2 times? Like, out of all of the teachers, out of all of the places in the whole, it's crazy. He is amazing. And I am so glad that you got to take his quant comparison lesson today. So we are going to go into now talking about best practices and getting into some coaching. And don't forget, my email poll is open, so you definitely have to put your email in there so that you can get the PDF and so that you can begin working with me, your free Kaplan coach for the week, so that we can get you even more points. And you know, yeah, absolutely, it's better than spending a month on your own. Every single piece of data that test makers have ever collected on test prep methods have always shown that students who work with a teacher or work with a course are always going to do better than students who work on their own, because again, it's testing how you think and you have to change how you think. And even with the book, you're still using your thinking to change how you think in order to show how you think. I mean, that's mind-boggling even to follow that logic. It's very hard to do on your own. But once you're with someone who thinks or sees it or has been taught to think and see it in the right way or the shortcutty kind of way, then it's a lot easier. So I'm glad, and there is so much light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm glad that you see that now. I'm going to go back to our objectives for today's lesson. Shout out a strategy that you learned. Just one strategy. Just give me a strategy, something that you learned from today's lesson. I'm going to make sure that we have all of those in our notes. What strategies did y'all learn? Absolutely. Absolutely. Alrighty. Just on day 2 of the free week of GRE prep. And what about time management? How are you going to save time using these new strategies? How is that going to help you? And what about having this focus practice? I know one of you just already told us that you feel like this helps you more than a month on your own. How is it having that guided practice with someone who knows what they're doing and knows all the shortcuts? I mean, isn't that awesome? I feel like sometimes we read an explanation and we're like, I think I get it, but then we try it on our own and it just doesn't work. So having that teacher with you to go through several problems at the same time is really helpful. And I want to tell you too that this is one of Kaplan's GRE channel lessons. So at Kaplan, we don't actually think that any student should have the same schedule. None of you have the same strengths or areas of opportunity. You're not all at the same different level, ready for the same type of difficulty. And so what we do here is we augment our core lessons, you can think of that as Gen Ed for GRE. We augment that with over 100 lessons that are elective based on difficulty over all of the different things of the GRE, all of the different question types, and then specific things about the question types as well. So this is more general of quant comparison, but we will also get into things that are very specific on certain types of quant comparison as well. And so that's what you just did with Boris today. So I'm so glad you liked it. And if you want more of those, you can always sign up as a Kaplan student. All Kaplan students will get access to all of our elective lessons. And if you do go to kaptest.com/events, you can always see the 1 or 2 that we do every week as well, totally free, as well as this whole week will be filled with them. So now I want to talk about our best practices because I don't want y'all spinning your wheel. And don't worry if you see the screen go white. That's just me covering stuff up because I want you to listen to what I'm saying. And sometimes I feel like if you're so busy reading, you can't hear me. And I want to make sure that you get that opportunity. So some things for best practices. The first is you got to know your starting point. You have to know your starting point. Shout out if you came to my practice test yesterday and you now know where you are. And that's great because if you did that, you're doing just what you need to do. It's okay to admit, and you can feel free to admit if this is you. It was me when I first started. Feel free to admit and be brave to admit if you've ever or are currently afraid to take a practice test because you feel like I'm not ready, I need to study, I need to go back, I don't remember math, like my vocabulary, I got to study some stuff, I'm just not ready to take a test. Because if that's you, it happens to a lot of people. It's so common that I put it on my list of best practices because a lot of us do that. But the thing is, you're not being efficient with your prep time. The average student is going to spend 120 hours preparing for this test. And that's average. That's average. So some students will spend a lot more time than that in preparation for this test, and you don't want to add to that. So if you don't know your starting points, you don't know what to study at what difficulty level, you don't know what's easy for you, what's harder for you, you might end up reading all of these chapters on something that you don't really need because it's either too advanced for where you're at right now, in which case you're not going to be grabbing it as quickly as you would, or you might be studying something that you're already pretty good at. Now you spent all these hours studying something that you're actually not going to get any points from because you're already getting all those points on the test. So it's not about being ready for a practice test. A practice test is a step towards becoming ready for your real test. I totally agree that we all know when we're not ready for our real test, but you don't need to be ready for a practice test. So if you're feeling that way, I hope that you are signed up for one of our practice tests this week. Just get it out of the way. You're going to get charts and you're going to get feedback. Those of you who took the test yesterday or have recently taken a practice test with Kaplan, how great is it to at least know where you're at in terms of your goals and get those charts and those graphs showing this is what you need to work on. This is your area of strength. This is your area of weakness. And to that end as well, one of the things that I see from students often is wanting to focus on weaknesses. I don't want you to do that either. I really advise a strengths-based approach because your strengths are what's going to carry you on test day. Not to say that you shouldn't attempt to turn your weaknesses into strengths. You should absolutely. But don't throw away or neglect those things that you're naturally good at that you could get points that other people won't be able to get. Those are things where you're going to shine and you want to really work on those as well. You just want to work on them differently. So if you seek out instruction on strengths, you want to seek out advanced material to get those extra points that no one else is going to get but you, because those are your strengths. And you want to do more practice and less instruction because those are your strengths. And then with your areas of opportunity, your weaknesses, you might say, you want to do more instruction and not at such an advanced level. And you want to do less practice items to begin with. You want to take more lessons with teacher boards and get more information because that is what's going to help you. But you've got to study everything because everything is going to be tested on your test. So take the practice test, get the feedback, find out everything about where you stand and about what you need to work on and how you need to work on it. And you will feel better, I promise. I know it feels nerve-wracking right now, but you're going to feel a lot better once you know where you stand, and you're going to have that guidance as to what to study and at what difficulty level so that you aren't spinning your wheels on anything. Because you say, I got to get ready, but what does that mean if you don't know where you are or at what level? So do that starting point. It's huge. It's going to be awesome for you. I promise. I promise. I promise. Now to that end, you also need a target score, because tell me, are you going to prep differently? Are you going to prep differently for a sprint than you would for a marathon? Is that a whole different preparation routine? Right? Or if you're going on a day hike versus climbing Mount Everest, like there's a whole different situation on how you're going to prepare. It's the same with this test. It's the same with this test. And so you need those target scores. And again, you got to do your research. We talked about this earlier. Do your research into the programs that you're interested in. Find out what scores they're looking for. Let that be your guidepost. Of course, you always want to do the best that you can, but you need to know about how long it's going to take you to prep to probably comfortably be safe for acceptance, and then maybe how long it will take to start getting those scholarships that you might want to be reaching for as well, because the GRE is your #1 way to position yourself for scholarships into your programs. And who doesn't like free money to school? Because I feel like that's like nobody doesn't like that. I'm checking my negatives there to make sure I said what I meant to say, but I think you know what I meant to say. The next thing is, don't just attack your textbooks. Shout out in my public chat if Teacher Boris taught you something today that your high school math books would never have taught you. Of course. What did you get all your points for on your high school math test? It was showing your work. And that's why now on this test, you always want to go into breaking to showing your work. You want to go in and do as much math as possible, but that's actually what is going to get punished on this test. There's not time for that on this test. It's not necessary on this test. And so all of your old math books are really prepping you for something totally different that you aren't doing here. When you want to prep for this test, get test prep. It is different than math instruction. It is different than a dictionary. And it's the same on all of them. So I'm so glad that all of you are seeing that, because sometimes that's the biggest thing that I have to break through on students, even after they come to Kaplan, even after they're Kaplan students, they still are very like, it's all about math, it's all about math, it's all about vocab, it's all about vocab. No, it's not. It's a test of the way that you think. It's a strategy game, and you're just playing a game that you don't know the rules to. Once you accept that 1, it's a game, and 2, you need to learn the rules, the sky is the limit for you. So don't just attack your old textbooks. No way. Don't do that. We're not doing any of that. We are going to study test prep because we are prepping for a test. So don't just study your old textbooks. That will help you a lot. The next thing is that I need you to follow a study plan. You need to be guided, whether you use a company to guide you all the way through and make personalized homework recommendations for you, like we do here at Kaplan. Like no two students at Kaplan will have the same homework recommendations, because again, you don't have the same strengths and areas of opportunity. Whether it be that detailed or whether it be something that you cobble together yourself, whatever it is, make sure that you have a plan, because just studying a little bit of this and that and here and there, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work for you. So you need to make sure that you're a little bit more organized than that, because again, the average student is going to spend 120 hours and 50% are going to spend more than that. And I don't know how many of you feel like you have that much time to just devote to this one thing, but that's what you're looking at. And if you want to cut it down, the way that you're going to do that is by following a study plan. 1, learn test strategies. Y'all know this. Y'all know this because you just told me that you've learned a bunch of strategies just here today. Strategies will carry the day. Strategies are what's going to take you from being pretty good at math and having a decent vocabulary to being an expert GRE test taker. So we got to learn those test strategies, and congratulations for being here this week because you're going to learn so many, so many. You need to use drills and realistic practice. Now, realistic practice is different based on what you're trying to achieve. Realistic practice means practice with a purpose. Practice with a purpose. When you're first starting, your purpose is to learn new strategies and master the different question types. And that kind of practice should be notes out. It should be untimed. You don't want to be constantly testing yourself. You want to learn something so that the next time you test yourself, you're really, really good at it. And so that kind of practice is untimed. It's notes out. It's with the teacher on speed dial so that you can get feedback immediately, right? Go to the teacher's office hours, come to my Skype office hours, email me, reach out to me, ask for a private tutoring lesson. I will be there for you. That's the kind of practice that you need when you're first starting. Now, as you're moving through, then you need to start adding in timing as well, but not always timing. When you find yourself timing and things are still falling through, that's time to go back to untime. It's time to bring out the notes again. There's something missing there. You got to get that. When you're heading into test day, I saw some of you are taking your test in like a week. Realistic practice heading into test day is very timed. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of mixed difficulty levels. It's a lot of mixed question types. It's a lot of full length practice tests, although not in the last week. I don't want you to do a lot of full lengths in the last week, but it should be realistic to the test, as realistic as you possibly can be. So you're going to want a lot of quizzes. You're going to want a lot of practice tests heading into test day. But remember, realistic is to your purpose, and your purpose will change throughout prep. But definitely if you're in those beginning stages, it's not about testing yourself over and over again. It's about learning new strategies and getting really good at them, because everything that you learn today, you're already starting to see movement, but you need to practice it. You need to practice it until it's the natural way that you approach, to where you look at that problem and you think, oh, I'm going to do this the Boris way. And you immediately jump to that instead of immediately going into long-handed math, right? So that takes a lot of practice. I like to say it's like learning how to type. You know, have you ever met someone who types like this? Like two fingers. Anybody know somebody like that? Like their grandma? Let's just call it out. I'll call it out. It was my husband. When I first met my husband and we were dating, he typed like this, just like this. And I was like, how are you a gamer and you type like this? Like, you have to learn to type. And I showed him how to put his hands, you know, whatever. And he tried it and he was like, oh no, I'm much faster like this. I'm much faster like this. And I'm like, no, put your hands, put your hands. And eventually, like, first you make some mistakes, but like if you're convinced that that will eventually get better and you keep working, then eventually you're like, my husband now types like 100 words per minute. It's been a few years though. But that's the kind of thing that you want to do. You want to take what you're learning and you want to practice it slowly and carefully, even if you make mistakes, even if you're typing like dad, you're typing like my husband, you're typing like whoever, you're typing like grandma, you know. Then eventually with practice, you can be going along here on the GRE as well. And that's what we want to get to. But just to encourage you, because it will be hard when you first try these things on your own. And you're gonna be like, I swear it worked when Boris did it. Why is this all falling? Well, it's because you're going from this to this. And it's a little slow and cumbersome at first, but then eventually it's just like it will be in grad school. And then another thing I need for you is I need you to get 6 full-length practice tests, at least 6 throughout your prep period. You want to, I know I said I don't want you to just test yourself, but you do need to test yourself and you need to build your endurance. You need to build all of your skills together, because it's not just mastery of the question types. It's also timing and pacing. It's also how you move through the section. Do you all move through linearly? Do you take the questions all in order? I bet most of you do or have in the past. And that's actually not the best way to do it. There's a lot that can be gained by marking questions, skipping questions, using the review function to go back. And actually the test maker has done a lot of studies, and other test taking data scientists have done a lot of studies. And what they have found is that using that review feature and picking the order that you take questions and thinking very strategically about how you do that actually means a lot of points. And you don't have to learn any new strategies for that. You just have to approach the section differently. And all of the data and all of the research shows that that equals points alone. And you need time to practice that. And so you need full-length tests for that as well. And we will be teaching you about that. I will definitely be teaching you about that. I like to use what's called the 3-pass approach. I'm not going to teach it today, but I will throughout this event make sure that you get all of the information on that. So make sure that you're signed up for all of our events as well. And the last thing is that you got to tap sources of expertise, which I know that you know because here you are. You were like, hey, I get a chance to talk to Kaplan experts. I'm going to definitely do that. So I know that you know that, but I want you to keep doing that. You should have all entered your email to get the PDF afterwards. I will send that. Feel free to write me back and tell me what you're experiencing. Ask me questions. I'm happy to advise you. It's literally what I do for a living. This is my life's work. I'm happy to help you, but you got to do that. You got to tap sources of expertise and be careful what a source of expertise is, because sometimes we go to our college advisors and they're great for a lot of things, but their job is different than my job. Their job is to ensure that you're ready for grad school. And that's a super important job. And I'm so glad that they're out there doing that and doing a bang up job at it. However, being ready for grad school may mean focusing on your old textbooks. It may mean reading all your old math stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be good enough on your GRE to get into the grad school to then put everything that they're telling you into practice. And so when you're thinking about sources of expertise, make sure that you seek out sources of expertise for your goal. Right? If your goal is, let me get some advice on how to do great once I get into grad school, there are people for that. If your goal is, let me get my emotional state right because I'm feeling stressed out about that, there are great sources for that. If your goal is, let me beat the crap out of this test, then that's us. That's us. My one and only goal for you is that you beat this test and that you get into your program. That's it. That's it. Not that I don't care if you do well when you're there. I hope you do, but that's not my goal, and none of my advice is geared towards that. My goal is this test, domination, and getting into your program. That's what I do. That's what we do here at Kaplan, and that's the type of person you should be seeking out when you need advice on the test itself. So that's what I have for you for best practices, do's and don'ts. I hope that you make a screenshot of this. I hope that you really keep this in mind, because if you keep focus on these points, then you will avoid what some people do sometimes run into, which is, spinning your wheels, spending a lot more hours than you're getting points out of. That always stinks. You don't want that to happen to you. So employing these best practices will definitely help. And now I'm just going to open it up to questions. I want to answer any questions that you may have. I'm happy to do so. What have you got? Let me know what you need help with, because you're not the only ones, and I will be happy to answer those questions. And I'm so glad that you want to dominate, that you should want to dominate. Listen, everyone is here for a reason. Most of us are type A, most of us are overachievers. We're all hard workers. We all did great in undergrad, and now it's time to apply all of those same principles to this test and kick its butt, because we can. Once you learn the rules to the game, you're going to do really well. And I'm going to answer your questions through. If I have the Kaplan GRE Complete 2018, do I get an online coach? Is that the complete course or the complete book set, Katie? Can you just clarify that question just a little bit? Because we have kind of both. If you have the Kaplan Complete course, if it doesn't say plus, it's not going to come with a coach. It doesn't come with a me, but you can always upgrade. So consider upgrading to a plus course, because a plus course comes with a lot of additional features. It comes with math foundations. So if the strategies Boris taught you were awesome, but you were also like, well, all of that is great, but I kind of forgot what I can eliminate. I kind of forgot how to deal with a negative exponent, or I kind of forgot how to deal with fractions and exponents, or any of those kind of mathier things. The plus courses not only come with a coach, but they come with math foundations, with additional lessons that are just the math that you need, like the things that are like, okay, this is not a strategy, this is just like math that you have to know. Because if you go back to study all of high school math, then what's going to happen is you're going to be inefficient again, because not all of that is tested. So we add additional lessons, just the math, to make sure that you're at the level to then work on the strategies and not feel like, okay, but wait, what do I do? How do I foil? How do I reverse foil? I don't remember that. We'll take care of it. So think about a plus course if you want to coach. And I love that you're thinking about that, because that means that you're thinking that coaching is awesome, and it is. We're your person. We're with you the whole time, and we meet with you, and we tutor you if needed. We advise you. We look at all your test results. It's an awesome relationship to have with somebody. And you can always request a coach too. So if you meet any of the teachers this week and you're like, I think that's the person for me, I think that their style of teaching is right, I think that their attitude is right for me, and then you can feel free to request us as well, and you may get us exactly as your coach. I coach all the time. I'd be happy to help you. What else have we got? Mackenzie, how should we use or study the practice test we took to improve? That's a great question. when you're a Kaplan student, we are going to make custom homework recommendations for you based on your results. So we kind of do that for you. But if you are not in the full Kaplan course yet, one of the things that you can do is you can take your practice test and you can divide it into question types that you're good at, question types that you're kind of hit or miss at, and question types that are just consistently having problems with. That's one good thing to start with. And then you should know that the things that are your strengths that you're doing really well at, seek out advanced GRE questions on that type of question. Here at Kaplan, we do that with our QBank. You can pick any question type by section or by specific type. You can pick the difficulty level. You can do it in tutor mode with explanations along the way. You can do it in timed mode with no explanations and time, just like the real test. Or you could do it untimed with no explanation. Right? You can organize it that way. But if you're on your own, then what you would do is you'd say, these are my strengths. Let me seek out some advanced GRE questions of this type, or some advanced reading material, some handouts. I'm going to send out a lot of handouts this week as well that may help with that. Let me get some advanced instruction. On those things that you're kind of medium at, you're like, okay, let me get some for everybody instruction. Let me seek out some kind of medium level difficulty questions and just see how I'm doing. And if you're still kind of hit or miss, I would do more and more instruction until you're less and less hit or miss, and then you'll do more and more practice. For those things that you're putting as consistent misses for you, you need to get basic instruction. Do not do anything advanced yet. Stop with the practice items. Don't just burn through practice questions, and really wait towards instruction on that. And again, this is all going to be decided for you, or you're going to get help through this whole process if you're a Kaplan student, but you can definitely employ the same ideas on your own. It just takes a little more prep work on your end, but it all starts with taking the test and then organizing it into strengths, kind of hit or misses, and weaknesses. But that's a great question. You should always think about your practice test as being more than a score that you got on the way to your ultimate day. It's way more than that. It's an opportunity to bring all the things that you're learning together, from your question mastery, your timing, your strategy in terms of taking the questions in the right order, your endurance, paying attention for that long. The score, of course, are you getting as many points as you should be for the amount of time that you're putting in? And then next steps, reviewing the test, not just for right or wrong answers, but for what should I be studying and at what level, and what do I need to work on now, and how should I work on it? All of those things are what the practice tests are for, not just what is the score that I get. So great thinking on that one. Alicia, is it better to guess if you don't know the answer? Absolutely. Absolutely. So many of us will have taken the SAT when there was like a wrong answer penalty. It's not that way on the GRE, right? So you want to put an answer down, because then you have a chance of guessing correctly, which is way better than no answer at all, which is just flat wrong, right? So you definitely want to guess anytime that you can. And if you always guess the same letter, you have a slightly higher chance of guessing correctly. So you might do that. And another thing too is an answer choice that sticks out like a sore thumb. Like if you had the answers here, I'll put them up on the screen. If you had answers like 1, 2, I'm putting them, hold on. If you had like these answer choices, 1, 2, 3.5, 4, and 5, which one just sticks out? Which one doesn't look like it's friends? It's C. It's C, right? C doesn't look like it's friends. It's got that decimal point. It doesn't look anything like the other answers. And so that one we would never guess. So that's another one for your guessing strategy, because that's almost never it. So if it sticks out like a sore thumb, it's out. It's out. Let's see, what else do we have? What else do we have? A Politiker. The most challenging part of the GRE is verbal reasoning. We have verbal lessons this week. Come, come, come. Because just like you saw with Boris today, it's not what you think it is. It's a game, and you just don't happen to know the rules yet to the game that you're playing, but we're going to fix that for you, and that applies for verbal as well. So come to the verbal lessons, and all will be revealed. Not all, but some, enough, and you'll definitely start getting points this week in verbal. So I can't wait to see you there. Beverly, is 3 months sufficient enough to study for the test? That is such a unique question. It really depends on your starting score, your goal score, and how much time you have to devote to prep in the 3 months, as well as how many resources you'll have. You can imagine that Kaplan students who do have the customized homework, who do have the most live instruction for GRE of any company anywhere, who have all of these practice tests, but the official prep test experience, that's another unique thing to Kaplan, is that all of our students get to go into the real deal testing center where the real GRE will happen for them and take a practice test, so that they get the real feel of getting taken in and searched and putting yourself in the locker and going in, and the real proctor and the people around you are actually taking their real test while you're taking a practice test for the most realistic practice. Like, we have so many resources for our students that our students are usually able to prep in less time than other students. So it just depends how many resources you have, how much time you have within the 3 months. Like, what else are you doing? Is all day, every day GRE for you? Or are you also working? Are you also going to school? Those kind of things. Where are you starting? Where do you hope to finish? So all of those things are going to come into play. But if you have your email in my inbox, I'm happy to advise you. And we actually have a link up above, Kaplan Teacher Consult. You can book me. I would sign up for that. Anybody who has these kind of questions, because you can get a totally free consultation with a Kaplan teacher, not only just about how long might it take you to prep, or what prep course is right for you, what resources are right for you for your time frame. They can answer all those questions, but they will also be able to answer questions about price as well. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you've ever felt like, oh yeah, Kaplan would be great, but that's out of reach for me, not necessarily so. Many people do not know this, but we actually work with students of all different financial means to try our best to get everyone into as much help as they possibly can be in. So we work with disabled veterans to comp their courses. We work with veterans of all kinds, also spouses of veterans, children of veterans for deep discounts. We work with many universities across the country in order to help comp the price of our courses for their students. So there's deep discounts there. We also have payment plans. We also have tuition assistance for students who are in undergrad who have financial need through the FAFSA. So we work just the same way as your undergrad works to get you financial aid there. We do the same thing here. So there's actually so much that we do. So if you've ever felt like, I wish I had Kaplan, but it's not in my reach, you really never know. You should sign up to have that totally free consultation with the teacher, because they'll be able to advise you not only on your timeline and what resources would work best for your needs, but also how you could pay for it and how we can help you with that as well. So I want to make sure that you know that as well, because that is really very helpful as well. But yes, 3 months can be sufficient. I spent about 3.5 months, and I went from a 141 quantitative, I'm not kidding, 141, which at that time was an 8th percentile. I told you I don't love math, I never have, all the way to a 167 quantitative. And my teacher was Gene Sue here. He's amazing. He still teaches here. And you know, that kind of jump is absolutely possible. It's still a lot of hard work, even with all the strategies, because you got to break yourself of your fear of math, of your fear of the test, of bad habits like jumping straight into math. But you definitely can do it. I did it, and I've been here helping people to do it ever since. So absolutely you can. But a lot of factors play in. So I want you to get a consultation, or write me back when I send out that PDF. Write me back, and we can talk it out and see maybe if that's enough for you, given the rest of the things that are going on in your life. Luigi, do you have a recommendation for a good study plan to prep for the GRE? Yep, it's the Kaplan study plan. All Kaplan students are going to get a study plan, and it's going to be custom to you and your strengths and areas of opportunity. Outside of that, not really. I think that it's so much based on your own areas of opportunity. That's why I don't agree with, and this is just a personal teaching philosophy of mine anyway. I don't believe that anyone learns best with something that's one size fits all. So if you get something, or you look at something and it's like, everybody do this and everybody do that, and then everybody will reach their goals, I really am automatically very distrusting of that. Because how could that be if you have different strengths, if you have different areas of opportunity, if you have different life outside of this test prep? Like, everything is so different by person, by goal, by lifestyle. Like, how could that possibly be that there's a one size fits all, like magic study plan for everybody? I just don't believe that. And that's why, again, here at Kaplan, no students get the same homework recommendations. No students are taking the exact same courses. You're using your elective lessons to take advanced this, beginner that, you know, very specific this or that, guessing strategy, section management, like whatever it is you need to work on. And then you have a teaching team to help you figure your way out through that. And you have also data metrics behind that that's doing that. So I can't really imagine, I just having been a Kaplan student, having been a Kaplan teacher for so long, I can't imagine any kind of one size fits all taking the place of that. But you can make your own study plan, especially doing what we were talking about before. Reviewing your tests really very, very thoroughly is a really good start to that. And then seeking out as much advice as you can get your hands on. You have us all week, so that's a big part of it. And then if you're looking for that awesome study plan, I think it's Kaplan's because it's custom to you and your strengths and areas of opportunity. And that's not just your first practice test. That's all of the practice tests that you take along the way are constantly changing that so that it's always changing. What is your strength that's different now than it was a week ago? What is your area of opportunity? It's different now than it was a month ago. And so everything is changing all the time based on that. And I think that that's the key to the most successful study plans is that it be personalized to you. But I hope that helps. And remember, if your email is in my box, I'm going to email out that PDF after class. And you're going to be able to write me back and you can ask me about whatever you're going through, and I'll be happy to advise. What else have y'all got? Bethany, how many hours would you recommend? Should I be studying? Should I spend studying for the GRE and weekends if I have school and job? As much as you can, Bethany. Listen, it doesn't do you any good to overwork yourself. If you're super busy during the week and then you're studying and you get to that point where like you're having to reread, you guys all know this point where like having to reread and it's just not sticking in there. That's not useful study time. It's actually robbing from the energy of your next study session as well. So you have to really find that healthy balance. I don't know how much you're working through the week, and I don't know how long you have to prep or how long you're going to give yourself, if you're going to give yourself indefinitely. And again, so this is so unique. Feel free to put your email in my box and we'll continue discussing because I have thoughts, but I want to make sure that they're unique to you and all of the things. And just knowing that you're working during the week is not enough information, but I'm happy to talk to you about this. So make sure that your email is in my box and we can talk about this throughout the week and we can see if we can get something personal for you. Let's see what we have. Zoe, same deal. Scarlett as well. Hillary as well. Irvin, how much time would you suggest to the regular person in school to devote to studying for the GRE? So I would say this is just for anyone. Let me give you a rule of thumb for all of you who are like, how much time should I spend? How long will it take me? The average student is going to spend 120 prep hours. So my rule of thumb is this: get out a calendar, put in everything that you know you're going to be doing. Oh, I have work on this day at this time. I have school. I have this. I have my cousin's wedding. All of the things that you know that you're going to be doing. And then try and put blocks of time, reasonable blocks of time. Don't put 8 hours of study on top of 8 hours of school because you're not going to retain all that information. So it's not going to be a valuable 8 hours to you. Reasonable blocks of time. Don't put what you're going to study, but just put blocks. Like, okay, I could study an hour here. I could study 3 hours here. I could study, 2 hours here or whatever. Just put your little blocks and then try and get to 120 hours because that's the average. And remember, a lot of people will spend more and people with more resources will spend less, but try and at least find the 120 hours because that's average. And that will give you a good idea of, okay, well, maybe I need to pull back on some of my outside stuff. Or maybe I need to change my idea of how long I'm going to spend. Or maybe I need to get more resources in order to cut this time down. And that would be a great way to kind of get an idea of what it might take you with your own personal schedule in mind. And that's a really good rule of thumb. So that would be my first piece of advice. And I hope that that helps you. Outside of that, you want to really personalize, but that's a good way to kind of figure out. And it's a good way to figure out your priorities too, because you may find that it takes you way longer than you want to spend in terms of weeks and months when you do that. And so you might start thinking, okay, well, really, do I really need to go to my art classes every Wednesday? It's not for credit. I'm just doing it for fun. Is that something that I could hold off on until after GRE prep? Because that would give me more study time and it would make the weeks less. Or you may say, I am spending I have a lot of hours, right? And I really have 3 months to spend. So maybe I won't do that many hours in a week. Maybe I'll spread it out a little more. I didn't realize I had that much breathing room. So doing that calendar will really help you to get a good beginning idea of the time as well. Let me see what else I have. Cap XPR, how much time before my application deadline should I take the exam? It really depends on how many resources you have. ETS does provide one free multi-stage practice test. They also provide one paper-based, but that's not very indicative. I would save that practice test to be one of the very last things that you do. But once you've done enough prep and your other practice tests are showing that you're in a range that you're comfortable with, whether it be a strong accept range or a scholarship range, and then you're like, you know what, I think I'm ready, take that ETS test. And if it also confirms that you are ready, then that's when I would go in and test. So I don't really like to think of I will test based on my application deadline. You should test based on when you're ready. Now, I know that's not possible for everyone because some people are up against an application deadline. So if that's you, then I would talk to the school and find out if they accept unofficial test scores. Some schools accept unofficial test scores. And what that means is that you can self-report to them what your score was before your official scores come back, because it does take a couple weeks for official scores. That gives you more time to prep, and you can use your practice tests, and you can take your real test even in that last week heading into the test, right? Give yourself a week, and then maybe you could take it twice in that week if you needed to, but you wouldn't need to if you didn't have prep. But you could take the test really right before the application deadline, and you'd give yourself the most amount of time to prep. But if the school says, no, we don't accept, and many accept unofficial, so that's the thing to know. But if they say we don't accept unofficial, then you want to test several weeks prior to that deadline so that you can get your official score back in time for the schools to have it sent over. But almost all of them will, and you can just apply kind of right away, which means like you could study up to the last week before that application deadline. But call in, find out, and remember, until you apply to them, you are in the driver's seat. You know what they want for their program? Quality candidates. They want to fill their program with quality candidates who are going to make a great name for the school, who are going to do great work, who are going to get published. That's what they want. And you are that person to them. And when you call, they're trying to impress you, and they're trying to help you, and they're kind of going to be so nice. Do not be afraid of them. Until you apply, you are in the driver's seat, and they're going to answer your questions, and they're going to be so nice, and they want to show off their school to you because they're trying to recruit you. And then if you do well enough on your GRE, even after you apply, they're still trying to recruit you, even more sometimes, because the number one for programs that are ranked, the number one thing that they're ranked on is the average incoming GRE score of their students. So if your score is higher than the average of their last crop of students, guess what? You're going to help them raise their rankings, and they know that, and they will recruit you. So for most of this process, you are in the driver's seat, and for all of the process if you do well enough on your GRE. So don't be afraid to just reach out and get all of that information. But in terms of your question, absolutely find out if they accept unofficial test scores, because that's going to be really important in terms of how long you can wait to take your test. But don't plan to take it twice. I really don't like that plan. Plan to be successful. And sometimes people ask me, well, Allie, how many times did you take the test? And it's kind of a weird question, because I mean, like, honestly, the answer is once, I guess, sort of, but it wasn't really, because I was a Kaplan student. So I had done thousands of practice questions, and I had done full-length practice tests, and we have the official test day experience. So our students get to go into the real Prometric Center and take a practice test right next to people taking their real GRE and get that super realistic experience. And then I had taken ETS's free test as well. So like by the time I'm going to take the real deal test, that's not my first time, right? I've done all this testing and practicing up till then. So that's what you really want to do, is you want to take a lot of tests and be prepared and do a lot of practice items. You just don't want to do it where anybody's watching, right? You want to do it at Kaplan. That's where you want to do it. You want to do it this week here with us. You don't want to do it on where anybody's watching. But you're gonna do great, and just reach out and ask them, and then you'll know for sure. Let's see. Oh, your second CATS question. So we've got that done. We heard it. Good. Let me see. Does that mean we're slowing down? This is awesome. We crushed this day of the free week of GRE. I'm so proud of you. Are y'all gonna be here tomorrow? Who's here tomorrow? Are y'all here tomorrow? I'm so excited. This is going to be huge. Tomorrow, we are focusing on a whole different topic. Of course, we're doing short verbal tomorrow. So tomorrow's a verbal day. Make sure that you're here. Make sure that you're coming, because it's going to be huge. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh yeah, but it's just about vocab, I'm just going to study my dictionary. Don't. You're making the same mistake that you might have been making before today's lesson, which was, I'm just going to study math. I want to study so much math. Absolutely not. Sign up for all of the lessons if you haven't yet. The link is there, kaptest.com/free GRE prep week. You can pick any of the sessions. You can pick all of the sessions. You can sign up and you can be here, because tomorrow is verbal. And just like we learned with Quant today, it's not a math test. Guess what? It's not a vocab test. And you are going to figure that out tomorrow. We're going to give you tips, tricks, shortcuts, and you're going to see what Kaplan is all about, and we can't wait to show you. We are so excited. Yolanda says she's here all week. So many of you, Megan, Emily, I'm so excited. I can't wait to see you then. See, the questions have slowed down, so I'm gonna let you all go. I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna let you go practice what you learned tonight. Break out your practice questions, and start practicing all that teacher Boris told you, because tomorrow it's time for verbal. I can't wait to see you there. I can't wait to see you there. Tomorrow's lesson is not at the same time. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Eastern, right? And that's different, and that's Eastern time. So if you're in a different part of the country, make sure to do the calculations. Like Pacific, that's 6 o'clock. You can Google if it's 9 p.m. Eastern, what time is it wherever I am. If you're out of the country, especially important as well. But it's at 9 p.m. tomorrow. It's short verbal. I will be there. One of our very best teachers will be there. I'm not going to tell you who. I'm not going to tell you who. I'm going to let it be a surprise. But it's going to be an equally amazing teacher, and I can't wait. I can't wait to see you. And y'all, yes, all have a great night, and we will answer more questions. Watch out for that email tomorrow morning with the PDF of tonight's lesson, and reach out to me if you want to. I'm happy to coach and advise you all week long, and I can't wait to see you then. I want to end on this note. Y'all know, those of you who know me will know that I love to end on this note. I want to thank you so much for choosing us to be a part of your prep journey, for choosing us to advise you and to guide you. I know that's scary. I know that your educational goals are on the line and that you feel like this test is, one of you said it was between you and your goals. And I know that it feels that way. And our entire goal and purpose and our life's work is devoted to helping people get over that line. So being chosen and allowed to do that is huge, because you're helping us to live our best life. And I really can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. We are humbled by your choice to choose Kaplan tonight and tomorrow, all week, and hopefully for your prep course needs, if you're going to get a whole course. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow and all week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.